Okay, this is part 8, dealing with TBS and his interesting historical reconstruction.
Christian sects that weren't even monotheistic. You had some groups that believed Jesus came from a different, more compassionate and loving God to save us from the punishments of the more vengeful God of the Old
The
Testament.
Gnostics and Marcionites, yep.
Each of these different Christian sects thought they had it right. Each of them believed they knew the truth. The sect of Christianity that came out on top got to alter and polish the texts in order to support their own theology. And
that's bold-faced lie. Bold-faced lie. They got to polish, and what did he say? Reconstruct or whatever. That basically it's the conspiracy theory, that the proto-Orthodox that came out on top constructed this Bible that they liked. Dan Brown, straight out of Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code garbage. There were variants, yes, in the text. There were verses that some scribes had changed, or that they felt they would have put it a different way. We can detect those very easily. But there wasn't this big conspiracy to put in only the text that we want. We talked about in the last video the Marcionites and the Gnostics. They weren't early. Let's go like this. Let's say you atheists, let's say, well, look at there's all these different views on the earth and what it is. Some people think the earth is flat. And there's scientists that think that. And then there's scientists that think the earth is only 6,000 years old. And then there's scientists that think the earth is shrinking. And then there's scientists that think the earth is a globe. And they're all competing. And then the ones that won, those globe earthers out there thought that they should polish the science and make it seem, and then they've taken over the UN and they've done all. Really? The Christian church was persecuted until 313 with the conversion of Constantine. It's persecuted. There's a big conspiracy. Let's keep going on here.
To rule out the possibility of interpreting the text in such a way as to support other theologies. And scholars have found example after example after example of those alterations in the manuscripts that we have today. It's as simple as that.
Yes, but that doesn't change the essential message. There are, like I said, these variants that we have, they're so insignificant. And then the only two major sections is John 8, which he's going to mention, or I think Melanoid mentions that. That's how you pronounce his name. But that John 8, yes, the woman caught in the act of adultery, that is a story plugged in Mark 16, 9 through 20. Those are the two big sections that were put in later. That's it. Then there's like little verses here and there, and a word change. Instead of the Lord Jesus Christ, is the Lord Jesus. 1 John 5:7, which is way later, not even in the ballpark, okay, of the 4th century or anything like that. So this conspiracy stuff is just
it's survival of the fittest. Just go to your local bookstore. I don't know Bibles that well, but I know you can pick up a New Revised Standard Version. You can just read the little notes at the bottom. It's pretty good. I mean, it'll tell you this passage wasn't originally in the gospel, or this was originally worded like this, and it's now come to mean something different, or there's all those different kinds of examples of that. I don't know. It's all in there. It's all in there. Just people don't.
They're insignificant. Doesn't change the essential message of the New Testament.
Usually bother to read it. So going back to our scenario one last time. On top of everything else, the copies that we're reading have been changed and altered and manipulated in and of themselves. I'm going to try to wrap this up here, try to come to some kind of conclusion. Like we said in the beginning, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, the claim in question is that Jesus of Nazareth, the one that we know from history, was and presumably still is the all-powerful creator of the universe manifest in human form. Yeah, that fits. That's pretty extraordinary. So that's the extraordinary claim. Now let's review what kind of extraordinary evidence do we have for that? We didn't see Jesus say or do anything that would indicate such. In fact, we've never seen Jesus say or do anything at all. In fact, we've never seen Jesus at all. We don't know anyone who saw these things, nor do we know that an account of these things even exists by anyone who would have seen them. We know that the only accounts which did exist were written not by eyewitnesses and were written not any earlier than 30 years after Jesus died. And unfortunately, we don't even get to know what those accounts had to say because we don't have them, and we never will. We have copies and copies and copies and copies of them, centuries removed from the originals, which we know can and have been altered in historically and theologically significant ways from generation to generation, and so on. Now I could go on, but just for the sake of comparison, have you ever heard of a guy?
Yeah, he's going to go on to some Indian guru guy. Actually, TBS, the situation is more like this. What we have is the best manuscript tradition by far of any other document of antiquity. By far. It's not, the next is not even close to the New Testament. We can detect these variants very easily. We can detect the mistakes. The vast majority of the changes were tiny little mistakes made or errors of the pen, but Ehrman states that in his book. So we have the best document from antiquity. Then you go back and we almost certainly have what the original said, the vast majority. It's very likely that we have the originals very close to the originals, at least. Ehrman will even acknowledge that. Best manuscript evidence from antiquity. Then we have not just one anonymous friend, we have 27 documents with Ignatius, with Clement, and all the other traditions in the early church. The Didache, the Shepherd of Hermes. We have all these documents that preserve tons of traditions that go very early to hundreds of witnesses. And then we have not one guy 40 years later that everybody's basing everything off of. We have a guy writing in the 50s who's in touch with very early traditions, the Apostle Paul. We have Mark that is dealing with early traditions, the book of Acts, Luke's, John, and Matthew, and all the other New Testament documents. Then you have the entire stream of Christianity, the early Christian church in the 1st and 2nd century, that are in touch with hundreds of eyewitnesses. Yes, there's a few eyewitnesses that wrote stuff down, but the tradition themselves go back to eyewitnesses that go back to the first generation. Hundreds of people. So it's not your one person and all this. And so anyway, we'll continue on in our next video.